That moment when you realize what you're teaching is essentially classical technique, so you can take what opera singers do the best, and that is being pretentious as hell. And judging how everyone else's techniques are bad. And hey, what's normal in opera and classical technique, which is getting the note every single time, never having a voice crack, being consistent as a machine, that is not even the standard for rock, except for Mr. Chester Bennington. He is using classical technique. It's just distortion and the metal screams. No one takes songs like Mr. Chester. Even Chris Cornell, which shares the exact replica of a technique, because he's being more precise in his sound. It's like a little sweet spot he has to stay in with like compression that is not as released and relaxed as what Chester is doing, which Chester is tapping into the loudness of opera, while Chris is remaining very low in volume. That will tire your voice out a lot more quickly, so that's why there is a distinction. And I am definitely in that level right now. My voice will never crack because it's classical technique. I never fail a note, but I can get a little too thin here and there, maybe like what is considered the worst vocal era of Chris Cornell, the Audioslave days. I can get a little too thin, so I'm working on that. I need to become more, operatic, even if I refuse because I want to, sing rock. Chester really made it work, so I'm gonna use him as inspiration, basically, and keep going. Mark Martel is fucking crazy. I mean, he is able to sing Queen songs live. Again, classical technique, obviously. And he beat Freddie Mercury at his own game. Freddie Mercury could not sing his own songs live, and he got vocal nodules, and for this specific discussion he cannot be too high, sadly. I'll put a name of a live performance here if you never heard him like actually sucking ass. If this video was about his actual skill, I mean, he would have his own category at the top over all of the singers. I'm sorry, but live singing, not really. Lane Staley, I don't think he's doing anything special. I think he's pushing a lot, and sometimes whenever he's not at his vocal peak, he starts struggling with notes like right away. It's just absolutely obvious when you have this classical technique difference with Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell will have, or Chester Bennington, they will have 8 more semitones of connected vocal range, while Freddie and Lane, whenever they're not peaking, they'll start struggling with like an A4 and a B flat 4, which again is really high. But these classical technique singers, they're like, oh, C5, no problem, all the time. Mark Martel has hit so many C5s. Actually, every time there is a C5 in a Queen song, he will hit it, while Freddie Mercury will just never do that, for example. And it's not because of having a higher voice, it's because they're not pushing. It's just like a light balance up there, and that's it. Oh, baby! But yeah, you can't get worse than Kurt Cobain, even if, I'm getting some nice people saying that he has used mixed voice for points. Honestly, if the S tier is opera technique and classical, healthy, perfectly beautiful technique, then coughing up blood after you sing has to be the F tier, just like the polar opposite. I bet Michael Jackson's is just like really good, but like we never got to see a lot of that, right? Because only the Bad Tour is not lip synced and actually live. Steven Tyler is a fucking beast. I don't know how he does it. I mean, he did get vocal surgery, so maybe he should be here with Chris. Hey, I don't know. Axl Rose sounds similar to Lane Staley and maybe Freddie in that sense. I don't know. Miles Kennedy will never fail a note and does seem very classically trained. Can even go higher than these people, I think, while still remaining with that, sounding connected effect, which is not actual connection, by the way, but it's achieving the effect. John Lennon is just a basic pushing your M1 laryngeal mechanism, hoping for the best, I think. Not much going on there. Serge Tankian is extremely good. It's sort of like a classical technique, but he's missing the volume, I think, now. It's very tiny, but you can tell it's healthy. So that reminds me of what I was saying about myself. Like, I think sometimes it's too tiny. I need to work on that. But the consistency is always there. It never fails. It's exactly what happened to Chris. It's like, worst case scenario, he'll sound too thin, but it's not like everything crumbles and you start cracking. And so it's a really good foundation. Matt Bellamy, amazing singer, but he has that very clear distinction of chest voice and falsetto, which these other singers, including myself, do not have because you're actually working in mixed voice, which is making one laryngeal mechanism sound like the other and vice versa, otherwise, you know, until there's no like this distinction anymore.
The human normal voice is the baritone voice, and the tenor is being different is a kind of artificial voice who must be constructed.
Matt Bellamy has an abrupt cut, but his falsettos are fucking insane, sort of like what Miles Kennedy is doing. It's very interesting. Robert Plant, I think, is using M2 a lot, but he did get vocal damage somehow, very quickly too, so maybe it reminds me of Freddie Mercury. Jonathan Davis, what he's doing is fucking just sounds exactly like the studio, reminds me of Chester Bennington, but you know, he doesn't have a mixed voice or classical technique, it's just again chest voice and the other thing, so maybe it reminds me of Matt Bellamy, what we just said. Tom York, same thing, nothing going on higher than that, and it's just very soft. So he has to go over here maybe. I mean, it's a good technique, so I can't... It's healthy, I guess. Like, he's not doing anything unhealthy. And his voice has remained the same throughout the decade. So I'm just gonna throw him a little higher. And then that's it, because these two are repeated. Okay, that's just my personal opinion. And I hope you kind of enjoyed this. Go check my other videos roasting my own singing, ranking vocal coaches on YouTube. And if you want to use classical technique, like what I'm doing, to sound like rock, and incidentally be extremely consistent every time, live, every single time, forever and ever, then go to m2.academy.